been let in. So I think we're good for attendance.
Right. Okay. Okay. We're back to virtual meetings again. It's like 1 minute we think everybody's okay, and we start normalising, and then before you know it, we get a new variant, and we're back to square one. But obviously, this variant is quite contagious. It might be less dangerous in terms of health, but I think the impact on people getting it is actually self-evident. The numbers are like going up each day. Let's hope that things get better. So it's good to see you all. Happy New Year. Hope you had a refreshing break. And let's hope this year it just gets better. Sun's shining anyway, and the weather's not been so bad. So that's a good sign. Good afternoon to everybody. We've got apologies from, a couple of points. Andy Peterson, he's resigned since the last meeting. He's got some other commitments. And David Sidlow is retiring at the end of January. So thanks to both for all their valued contributions, and I wish them good luck with whatever they're doing. Have we got any other apologies?
Yes. Yeah. I've been notified of apologies from Councillor Pryor, Martin Booth, Neville Young, Simon Wright, and Peter O'Brien. Yeah. Have we got apologies from my chief exec? She's not well. She was with us. Liz, has she from Jackie?
I haven't heard. I don't know if Ben hasn't.
Yeah,
but
no, she's not.
Well, no to apologies. That's a shame.
Yeah, not apologies, because she wasn't well, and I said to her that you need to just take some time out, because she was really full of cold, and she didn't feel right or sound right. So just no to apologies as well. Okay, item 2, declaration of disclosable pecuniary interest. Martin, did you put your hand up, or did you just? No, my system just pinged and your name came up, so I thought you were going to say something.
I wanted to declare, just to make everybody aware and just be transparent, the University of Leeds and Nexus is leading a consortium to bid for the Innovative Entrepreneurs tender. So I just wanted to be upfront about that at the start of the meeting.
Okay, thanks a lot, Martin. And if there are any forms that we need to fill in, just pick that up, and just so that we've got that on the record. And if anybody else has got any interest, let the officers know during the meeting, just to make sure that we get that on record. So, you got your hand up?
Yes, just to add that I'm also involved with Martin in that very same exercise there, from the University of Huddersfield and 3M Buckley Innovation Centre. Okay,
thank you. So, I don't see anybody else. Ben, you got your hand up?
Thank you, Councillor Pandor. Just to say hello to everyone, really, and to introduce myself. I'm Ben Still. I'm Managing Director of the Combined Authority, and hello to those of you that I know. I'm here just because, as Councillor Pandor said, we've shifted to online, having this as an online informal meeting. But any decisions that are taken by the committee, therefore, can be actioned by me under my delegations from the Combined Authority. So it enables progress to be made, even though we can't hold the meeting in a face-to-face way. But at that, I'll stop talking there, Councillor Pandor, and hand back to you.
Yeah. No, thanks, Ben, for that clarification. It's just that the rules allow us to meet, but I think it's only common sense that if we all get into one room and one of us gets tested positive, then we'll all have to isolate. And if you start doing that, you can imagine the whole thing just comes to standstill. I think it's a good move that the Combined Authority made, and a lot of other local authorities are doing the same. I know my local authorities, and I'm sure the private sector is doing the same thing as well, to make sure that they have business continuity and make sure that business continues, to make sure delivery carries on. Item 3, exempt items. I've got here appendix 1 to agenda item 9B is exempt from the press and the public. So when we go on to that item, I'll assume that we will have read the item that's excluded from the public. I'll just assume that. If anybody's got anything else or contrary to that, just let me know. Item 4, minutes of previous meeting. But before I do that, what I'll do is I'll just give you a quick update for myself regarding a chair's update. The manufacturing task force, many of you will be aware that the task force is a pledge from the mayor. It's now been set up and has met for the first time. And Andy Wright, who's actually here virtually. Are you still in America, Andrew? Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm here in America.
Yeah. Well, Andrew's been asked by the mayor to actually, and she was also the deputy chair of this committee to lead the task force. So thank you for agreeing to do that, Andrew. It's really appreciated. You bring a lot of experience and knowledge with that. And the reports will be brought to committee sometime in the future to just give us an update and recommendation from the task group. Health tech strategy, again, this has been considered at the committee, and you also went to the LEP board for the last meeting, and further amendments will be made, and the board will discuss this until moving forward. But again, this I think the view of the committee was that this is something that we need to focus on, and a lot of the innovation that's done is usually done with entrepreneurs, with people with skills that actually have an idea that moves forward. I was listening to somebody called Asif Ranguni, who's can you hear me? I seem to have gone still. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
My video links got gone. I'm back on. Yeah. Asif Ranguni, he's an Asian entrepreneur. You may have heard of him, and he actually set a business up many years ago, selling burger buns to KFC and all the outlets, and he made millions doing that. And one of the things he said was that if you've got a hunch and if you've got an idea, you've got to just drive it forward, and just got to be persistent with it. You can't manage to do it. No disrespect to any manager, because I've been a manager in the past as well. So this is a bit like the health tech strategy. Health tech is so fluid at the moment that we need to actually get behind it and innovate and do some research around that to actually get the right solutions for the future. You also will be aware that the LEP review is ongoing. Whatever happens with the LEP review, one of the things I'm very clear about, and I'm convinced that the role for the private sector has never been more important. Now, whatever comes out of the review, I know that our Leeds City Region Enterprise Partnership is one of the best in the country. Everywhere I go, every time I go and do my national stuff, I actually say that actually our partnership with the private sector in West Yorkshire is probably one of the best. Roger always goes and celebrates the fact that every £1 investment leaves within 5 or 6 or whatever, many multipliers of private sector investment. So whatever comes out of it, yeah, I want to make sure that the private sector, the SMEs, the backbone of our communities and our business is actually supported through the LEP, and we'll make sure that we get some kind of infrastructure in place to actually make sure that continues. So please be assured, right? Yeah, I value all the private sector contributions and everybody on this committee and broader, because we need to build on that. Is there anything else I need to go through, Liz, on the minutes? If anybody else has got any contributions to make, Liz?
No, it's just to confirm if everyone's comfortable with the minutes. That'd be fine.
Yeah. We just yeah, I've got a thumbs up, so thank you very much. Item 5 is economic reporting. This item provides a broad context for the work of the committee, and Tom is here, who will hopefully provide more information in terms of what we're doing. You probably are all aware that the government has put in Plan B restrictions. What that means, I'm sure Tom will cover that, and how the economy and labour market will generally be heading in the direction within West Yorkshire City Region. Footfall across all retail destinations before Christmas, surprise, was down by 24%. This was lower than same time in 2019, year before, and on Boxing Day it was down 41%. And again, this was lower compared to pre-pandemic levels. Decline was most significant in the smaller local high street. You're also aware that the Bank of England forecast for inflation is to go up by 6%. That's going to have a massive impact because one of the things I've got to do in my budget is to actually increase council tax. Although it's not going to go up massively, the local authority will be increasing their council tax up to 1 plus 2%. The 2% will be normal council tax and 1% will be the adult social care precept. But if inflation is going to go up to 6% in April, then that will put a lot of pressure on my services that I'm running. I'm sure that same will go for the local authorities and the private sector as well. On the back of that, the Bank of England increased its base rate, I think first time in many, many years, as far as I can remember, to 0.25 to try and combat inflationary pressures. So we're moving into the new year with some optimism, but at the same time, there are huge challenges. What I'll do is I'll ask Tom to actually provide some further information that I've not covered. Tom, over to you, and then we'll have a discussion. Tom?
That sounds good, and thank you very much, Chair. So as was mentioned, the Plan B restrictions have been introduced. I believe they were introduced coming up to a month ago now. So there is an element with all economic data of there being a lag. So there isn't masses of data we can present currently to show what the impact of Plan B is, but rest assured we are looking at what we can to try to figure out sort of what's going on, and over the coming weeks we'll have more data available that will shed insight, if you like, into the Plan B, into the impact of the Plan B restrictions. But what I'm going to do here is I'll go through some of the labour market data that we've got access to, as well as focusing on the leading indicator data from the Q4 Western North Yorkshire Chamber of Commerce Economic Survey, which is published next week, I believe. So in terms of the employment figures, that they generally have been looking strong since restrictions have been lifted across the economy sort of as a whole, albeit there's obviously been pockets of restrictions across the country depending on what's been going on. But what we've seen between October and November 2021 was employment continuing to increase, and it's now back above 1 million in terms of payrolled employees. It's 3% higher than pre-pandemic levels, and it's much higher than the employment figures were when they were lowest, which was around November 2020. So they're 50,000 higher than November 2020. One of the good pieces from this in particular is that all local authorities in West Yorkshire have actually returned to pre-crisis levels of employment. So you don't have a situation where, say, Leeds is doing particularly well whilst another local authority might be struggling. All are now above their pre-pandemic levels. Of course, the reimposition of restrictions could have an impact on that, and we're waiting to see what goes on there. In terms of other labour market indicators, the claimant count has continued to fall, but ultimately there is still a very large number of people on out-of-work benefits. The latest figures show a 2% fall in the count between October and November to 83,000 in West Yorkshire. So it's around 25% lower than its peak in March 2021, but it's still 47% higher than pre-pandemic levels from February 2020. There are variations at the local authority, so at the local authority level. So, for example, the claimant count remains 54% higher in Bradford compared to 35% higher in Calderdale. And what we know is the claimant count unemployment rate for West Yorkshire is slightly higher than the national average across England. And as the chair mentioned earlier on, inflation is expected to reach 6% around April 2022. So that could have a major impact on, first of all, people that are out of work, but equally it might explain why there's more people claiming out of work benefits, because they're looking to get into the labour market, and so far they haven't been able to. I'll just touch on quickly the job retention scheme, which came to an end on the 30th of September 2021. As of September, 35,000 jobs were still furloughed in West Yorkshire. We don't have local data available in terms of what happened to those, but the national data suggests some positive news, if you like. So of those furloughed across the entire country at the end of the scheme, 65% returned to work on the same number of hours, 16% returned to work on reduced hours, and 6% returned to work on increased hours. So the vast majority have returned to work in one way or another, with a majority returning to work on the same hours or increased hours. And what we've seen in terms of recruitment activity, certainly throughout November 2021, is that recruitment activity has been going up across all local authorities within West Yorkshire, with Leeds registering the strongest growth rate. Now, this was quite often driven by sectors most impacted by the pandemic, whether it be healthcare, leisure, hospitality, that type of thing. So this might be a domain where we see quite sharp changes as a result of the Plan B restrictions being imposed, but we're yet to receive the data on that. So that's something that we'll keep a very close eye on. Now, in terms of the Chamber of Commerce survey, that shows a similar picture. So there are some positives. So if we start with the positives first, we've got domestic sales in particular showing continued signs of improvement. UK companies are reporting increased activity, whether it be sales that they'll be able to commit to in the future, or sales they're able to deal with now. In terms of export sales, international sales still remain subdued, so there's still a lot of supply chain disruptions, and equally there's a big issue around the cost of logistics and shipping in particular. So those companies that are reliant on importing and exporting, they're having a slightly trickier time. In terms of investment, though, this is a good thing. Manufacturers have reported increased capital investment over the last 3 months. Part of that is due to delayed projects from 2020 and early 2021 now being introduced, and likewise being able to deal with some of that domestic demand as well. So they're investing in their companies, which hopefully will help the region deal with some of the productivity challenges that are well noted. The biggest issue for businesses in particular in the last couple of quarters is around business costs. So this leads us nicely back to the inflation conversation. So what we've seen is rising raw material prices has been putting a lot of pressure on inflation, but in particular over the last 3 months, energy costs have been increasing dramatically, particularly in natural gas prices, which could have an impact on fuel poverty in the region. And then finally, because the labour market the demand for labour is particularly strong at the minute, wages are heading in the right direction if you're able to get a job, but likewise that could be passed on in terms of prices for the end consumer, and manufacturers in particular are expecting to pass these costs on in the form of price increases. It's over 70% of manufacturers are expecting to raise prices over the next 12 months, and that's the highest in the survey's 32-year history. So there are lots of things to be positive about in terms of the employment picture is looking particularly good. Business investment increasing is looking good. The fact that domestic demand is sort of held up and grown is also good, but there are persistent challenges that we'll need to consider in terms of making sure that everyone has access to the labour market if they so wish. And then of course there's this inflation pressure which could prompt further action from the Bank of England in the future, which could weigh down on economic growth as well if interest rates have to go up particularly fast, for example. So thank you very much, Chair, and if anyone's got any questions, I'm happy to help.
Councillor Byford and then Councillor Stullion. Alan, over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Panda. Thank you for that report. I found that really interesting. On page 21, it says there that Leeds and Kirklees registered the strongest growth rates for job postings in November. I don't disagree with Leeds, but according to the graphs below, Kirklees registered the lowest, with Calderdale, Bradford and Wakefield all registering stronger growth. So am I reading it wrong, or is the document wrong? Because the reason I highlight that is that reading through all of this, and it goes on into the transport insights, which we'll discuss later, it's very much Leeds centric again. There's lots of big valuable points that's being raised about Leeds, and others are being lost. And if we look at the when we go into the transport insights, it's probably even more common in that one than it is the rest of them. I make the point again that I made last time. It's not Leeds Combined Authority, it's West Yorkshire Combined Authority. There are some very big cities out there that's not called Leeds, that's doing some amazing stuff, and it's not reflected in here. I know the information's there, but when mistakes are made, as I see it as a mistake, and if I'm wrong, I apologise, is that it don't really fill me with much confidence that we reported things accurately. Sorry for my rant.
Tom, do you want to just provide a response to that if you can?
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. And in terms of the figures, I'm more than happy to go back over them. But if I remember correctly, from when we pulled them together, it was to do with percentage increases in growth. So, for example, Kirklees might have, I think if I remember correctly, Kirklees was one of the, had performed perhaps less well than the others if you go back a few months. But since then, it's improved more than say Calderdale, for example. So it could be an element of the raw numbers versus percentage change, but happy to have another look just to make sure that what we're saying is correct. It might be a case of an explanatory note could be useful.
Thanks, Councillor Scullion. Jane, with you.
Thank you. And certainly what affects Kirklees affects Calderdale as well, really. There's a lot of permeability across the boundaries of our two authorities. Really welcome this report, but this is a movable feast, really. We're watching that data month by month, and we're not finished yet because we're not finished with COVID yet. And I think the short-term impact of COVID on each of the 5 authorities is yet to be fully seen and fully understood. I think I just want to flag up in terms of what we are watching a lot in local authorities is the health and social care market in terms of recruitment and retention and also transport, both of which have got a major effect on other parts of our local economy and are indeed at the moment our business continuity. But I just wanted to say that I don't think we quite yet can unpick the short-term impacts from longer-term impacts. So one to watch. Thank you.
Thanks. I think that was more of a comment, but I think we just need to see how things pan out, especially in the next couple of months as we get more data around the pandemic. For the moment, right here, we've got the health issues versus the economic issues, and at the same time, we've got people's hearts and minds that are in a different place. But good points were made, Jane. Mandy?
Thank you. I noted the number of liquidations in recent times going up slightly. I think it's worth pointing out that we have a number of manufacturers in our region, and within manufacturing, there are winners and losers in the pandemic. But I think that generally the length of supply chain is a lot longer than in, say, the digital industry because of buying material and shipping out the door, especially if you're exporting. The government put in place CBILS loans and bounce back loans to help businesses, but those things are all time-based. One of the things manufacturers need is patient capital. The government did provide an extension to CBILS of 10 years, but that is at the discretion of the banks and their forbearance proceedings. I think it would be interesting to try and lobby government to extend CBILS to 10 years as committed, as the banks don't really have that much skin in the game, and that might help a number of businesses in our area in terms of liquidations.
Thank you. Tom, do you want to come back on before I bring Councillor Naheed Mather in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just very, very quickly to say that, as you said, business liquidations have increased in recent weeks, and there's obviously throughout the pandemic, there's been a wide series of various initiatives introduced. So this is one of those areas where we are going to keep quite a close eye on things, and likewise work with the data we have, the data that we can potentially access in the future to figure out sort of why some of these things are happening. Because, as you say, we don't want business liquidations to go up. Obviously, some businesses will open, some businesses will close, but understanding why those businesses close, why they have closed, it would be very valuable, and that's something that it would be great if we could get data on.
Thank you. Councillor Naheed Mather. Naheed, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I do think that there is a bit of a data. So, for example, if we start from the beginning, paragraph 2.1, and I think this was mentioned about the claimant count is still 40% higher than pre-pandemic. I need to be persuaded, because I think it's a moving feast, and we haven't seen what the Chamber of Commerce is saying. you know, there isn't the depth of analysis. I do know, for example, we're in Kirklees, and I'm talking about us, is that there will be difficulties with the supply chain in certain areas and the costs going up. So I think at the moment it seems to be masking in averages and, you know, who's doing well and it's looking good. I think we need to be careful not to over egg the pudding, because there are winners and losers, and I think it's going to have some profound impacts on being able to deliver in time frames. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Nahid. I think again, you made the sort of same kind of points, the same sort of points that Jane made, and obviously the data is what it is. But one of the things is that things are going to be changing very, very quickly, because a lot of the variables are out of our control. With the back of the pandemic, you know, we've not had this kind of a crisis in health ever before, and you know, there's also various other variables which we've not really talked about. Brexit for one, so it is a changing feast. You're absolutely right. Andrew.
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasise the productivity point, really, in that I think the number mentioned for inflation here is 4.5% predicted. Certainly in our business, it's probably more than twice that at the moment, the actual spot rate. And we're trying to hire people and we can't find them. And there is talk of putting wages up and everything, which, you know, is positive in some respects, so good. But it does point to, exactly as has been said, that, you know, there is a squeeze coming. And I think that our emphasis as this group on productivity is ever more relevant, really, as it's just going to be required for people to invest more, to Mandy's point, but also to be more highly trained and to be more efficient in their work if we're just to survive and to keep going in the next environment. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely right. And there's an industrial strategy that's suddenly gone very quiet nationally. So just keep an eye on that, you know, what happens to that. But you're right, productivity is probably the critical bit, not raising wages. Although raising wages is good, but you can't just allow inflation to keep things, you know, it's wrong way around. Richard, Axman.
Hi everyone, Happy New Year. Just a couple of points on some of the reporting. So we look at new recruitment, which is great, and we talk about sort of potentially the hospitality increases, etc., and healthcare, of course. And I think you made a point that during the pandemic these may have been affected. But what I'd quite like to see, and it goes on some of the sort of the jobs reported, again, what industries that they're in and what does it look like pre-pandemic to what it looks like today, to see if there has been any real shifts in that employment mix. And I think that might help with sort of understanding a bit of the future support that we might have. And on a similar note, we use the new bank accounts for signs of new business activity, which is great. And I know the data is quite limited, and I think we have on this before, but it would be really good to see which industries those new bank accounts are being opened in, and again, so we can understand a little bit more about, you know, what sort of companies are opening up, where again do we need to focus our efforts and support. I think, you know, the data is positive, but again, not overly helpful if we're trying to make decisions on how best to help people in the future. And absolutely agree with a lot of the comments, especially on the productivity side of things. You know, our inflationary pressures have been pretty high here from lots of things, and logistics being one of them, but raw materials and definitely staffing, with it being a really competitive environment in medtech at the moment for us. Thank you.
Thanks. Tom, do you want to try and answer the questions that Richard posed?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just something to say very briefly, and this is somewhat of a caveat with economic forecasting in particular generally, is the forecast inflation that was written when that was published when this report was written has subsequently been upgraded to the 6% figure that was referenced earlier in terms of April 2020. So as has been mentioned by a few people, economic forecasting is difficult in the best of times, let alone when the health situation in the economy is moving in this way. In terms of the labour market data, obviously the more granular we can get, the more cuts we can do on it in terms of sectors, types of jobs. If we could do it by earnings and things like that as well, that would be great. There is sometimes a lag with these things, which can often explain why we don't have that data now, but it is something that we like to get hold of sort of when we can. In terms of the business bank openings, you're right that it provides a useful kind of live indicator, if you like, of business startup rates, so you don't have to wait for the BEIS and ONS data sets. And the sector splits which you referred to, I can have a look to see whether that is something that's available that we can use in future reports. I'm not 100% certain whether it is available currently, but I can certainly have a look, because I think it would be valuable to see what type of businesses are opening and closing.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. That'd be very interesting to see. Mandy, you come back in?
Yeah, I think that's really important, Tom, because although manufacturing might not be the sexiest of industries, it is still an important industry to our region. And I think that that understanding that in terms of especially things like energy and the effect that that's having on businesses where we are big energy users often, I think is really important.
Okay, thanks for just reinforcing the points that have been made earlier on. Thanks for that, Mandy. Okay, so this report is just a note, and we'll keep a track of what's happening. Oh, Carl, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Pandon.
You nearly missed it, mate. I just managed to catch it. Economy eye.
Don't worry, I was gonna make sure I jump in. So, but thank you so much. Just a quick comment, and it just kind of reiterates that point about having a bit more detailed information. It's just on point 5 of the report, equality and diversity. It talks about it gives a national perspective of those who are more likely to be affected by in the jobs market. And I think it would be useful for us to actually just have a simple breakdown of who those higher risk people might be. And it lends, I think, to the conversation we had previously about linking, some of the work of our committee to skills and the skills committee, and ensuring that we have a much clearer about the targeting of those higher risk groups. So if we could just kind of, when we do, present a very useful insight like that nationally, we can kind of just add a little bit more information as to identify some of those key target and vulnerable groups.
Yeah, no, I think your point's well made, because certainly around the pandemic, we all know that people who are economically not as well off as a lot of people are, employees who actually have got no choice but to work from home. Not work from home. Frontline services, the bin refuse collectors, the care workers, the people who work in the supermarkets, who actually a lot of the time work on minimum wage. It's shown in sharp contrast that the levels of deprivation and poverty that we face in this country, and that's really, really important. One of the things that the Mayor is very focused on is inclusion and diversity, and that inclusive growth, and this is what we need to focus on. Also, later on in the report, Brian will give us an update on how this committee links into the skills committee, because it goes hand in glove. Maybe we might want to find a mechanism, because what I don't want to do is I don't want to stop progress in terms of reporting, but what we do also need to do is understand the issues you're talking about, Carl. And what I will do is I'll have a conversation with the officers separate to this meeting in terms of how we actually keep an eye on that, because I do know that Tracy is very, very keen to do that. And we want to make sure that the new opportunities that will be coming, which there will be, you can't keep on going downhill. There will be a trend that will start going up, where a new economic opportunity will arise. We need to make sure that the economics of our region is shared as widely and as equally as possible. So we might want to just have a conversation with that. Liz and Brian, some of the day we can't really get down to nuts and bolts at the moment, and it would be foolish for me to say, yeah, you're right, and not do anything. But it's a very important point. It's something that we all passionately care about. Liz, do you want to add anything on that? But we are having a separate report, Carl, where we're linking skills into this committee, and again we can have another conversation around that. Philip Wilson, you got your hand up. Philip, have you got your hand up? You're on mute, I think. You want to unmute yourself, please?
There we go. I've got two mute. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, good. Thank you. No, thank you for the report. Where I struggle a little bit is to figure out where the figures are important. And you just touched on it yourself a little bit. And what are the, these are indicators of things that are happening. But if I think about our business, and we have, key performance indicators, and from a financial perspective, we're looking at certain aspects that we don't want to, cash flow, for example, we're keeping an eye on that, and we can balance that. But the discussions that we broadly have here is sort of saying this is the information, but how does that really translate into actually, no, this is a real alarm bell in what is happening, and actually some form of action needs to really take place. It's sort of interpreting the data, but the individual groups and other discussions that depend off this, how can that feed back into the type of reporting that, we really need to have a discussion about these?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Phil, and you mentioned alarm bells. If the last 24 months or so hasn't raised any alarm bells to any of us, I'd be surprised.
Yeah,
he has raised alarm bells, hasn't it? It's raised alarm bells as a society, as a region, as a place. There's a number of issues. Firstly, the disparity between the north and south is very, very clear, and we saw that with the recent announcements on the transport investment. It's not gone half the way we were expecting, and the promises that were made. And again, it's not a political point; it's a point that's well recorded, and that in itself then leaves us behind compared to other regions. And Manchester region did get a better deal than us. Having said that, they didn't get the deal that they should have got compared to the southern part of the country. So there's that disparity which we need to understand. And then within that, there's actually further disparities in terms of the place and where we live. And it goes back to what Carl was talking about earlier on, that when we talk about equality and diversity, and I talk about equality and diversity in the widest sense. It's about all the inequalities that we have. And one of the things, and just to repeat myself, I might not have been clear, the pandemic has hit people who don't really have a choice that we do. They don't have a choice in terms of what kind of jobs they're going to. They don't have a choice regarding how they work. They don't have a choice in terms of a lot of things that we take for granted. The choice you and I have is we can do what we're doing now, and we can still work. I've been working from home since before Christmas, but the people that work in the supermarkets and retail and leisure and all the things you take for granted, they don't have a choice. And if you look at the socioeconomic background of the people who work in them industries, who are very, very important to the business sector of our locality, very important. And that's where we need to sort of reflect and understand what exactly is happening and how we can actually get a better level playing field You know, if one benefits, everybody else needs to benefit. It can't be just one benefits and everybody else sort of is left the scraps. Having said that, I understand that, you know, business is a lot more complicated than that. And in terms of how we drill down and understand what's happening, and this is what I said, I need a conversation with officers separate to this to see how we can actually bring something that's meaningful and how we can then get this committee to fully get behind it. You know, it's like the minimum wage and the living wage we were talking about. You know, it's very easy to do, but I understand that some companies, if we say to them that one of the conditions on you being able to access the grant is to actually put your wages up by this much. Well, what I don't want to do is I don't want to scupper their business plans. So, you know, there needs to be a conversation that needs to be had, and we need to carry people with us. But there are big challenges, Philip, and I completely agree with you. Brian, your hand is up, so do you want to come in and?
Can I just say, I think the point is that I don't see where a lot of the discussion is where it's trying to get to in the data that is presented. It's like you've outlined many different areas just now yourself of areas that are objectives and aims, but the data is presented as the data is seen. But how does that link in across all of the different areas? That it's like I can't see from that data of how we're doing.
Absolutely, and that is the $1 million question. How does it all link in, and then how do we then make an impact and influence what comes out? Brian, I'll bring you in now.
Yeah, I mean, some brilliant points actually from Philip and Carl. Obviously, the pandemic's affected disproportionately some sections of our communities across West Yorkshire, and the starting point for addressing some of those inequalities that have been talked about is understanding, you know, the strategic context and moving to much more towards evidence-based, you know, strategic planning and addressing some of those issues based on the evidence. And I guess just on a practical example, if you were to look at some of the business support programs that we're delivering, we're currently mapping where those business support programs are being delivered over the multiple index of deprivation, so that we can see that, you know, 80% of the business support services that are being delivered are actually targeted on businesses within those deprived communities. I think there's a lot more work that we can do, you know, collectively to collect and analyze information and turn that into knowledge and insight to drive better decision making. And I think as a starting point, it's understanding what the strategic context is. The challenge, as always, is that we're looking at historic data, not real-time data. So it's a bit like driving forward, looking in the rear view mirror. So moving towards a position where we've got really good quality current data should improve the way we target resources and intervene to address some of the inequalities that colleagues have talked about.
Yeah, this is the beginning of the conversation. This is not the end. So I'm just conscious that, you know, we're on the first item and we spent 45 minutes. So in future, what we need to do, we just need to put time scales on. So we give equal weighting to items. Not to say that, you know, I want to curtail debate, but I'm sure we've got other things that in our diary. So that's to note the contents, and obviously we'll take on board what comments have come back, and we'll try and work something around that to come back to a future meeting. Item 6 is the innovation challenge competition. This is something that the Mayor Tracy is very keen on. You know, part of the work she's doing, and we've all heard of the West Yorkshire Innovation Framework, which is something that we all have agreed to. This is part of that, and this is actually something that actually dovetails into what we're trying to do with this challenge competition. The Mayor Tracy has actually highlighted that the 3 areas of focus that she wants to focus on. One is in terms of SMEs and entrepreneurs. Those are university students, in terms of the younger generation, how they can get linked into this. And even younger generation and the secondary school children, how they can link into this. And climate emergency is something that Tracy's actually talked about quite articulately in terms of what she wants to do in terms of having a priority. So basically, this will be announced at the West Yorkshire Innovation Festival that will be launched later in the year. And day-to-day management of this will be done by an appointed delivery provider. Michael McComb, is it? McComb, who's on in the meeting, will hopefully provide a bit more information on this, and we'll have a discussion, and then we'll move forward. So, so is it Mitchell? Mitchell, sorry, I said Michael. Mitchell McComb, sorry, my apologies.
No problem. Thank you, Councillor Pandor. I'll just quickly, briefly go over the paper, but you've covered a lot of the key points there. So this basically arises from the innovation framework that the Combined Authority approved last year, and it's one of the key kind of action areas really about moving towards a mission-oriented based approach towards innovation. And challenge competitions are really ways to generate innovative activity and kind of build enthusiasm, motivate groups or individuals to get involved in innovation. And basically, one of the key things about these types of competitions is that we're trying to get people, individuals or teams, to kind of come together, develop solutions to a given problem. So they would typically apply to a competition, then they would be shortlisted and perhaps given financial or business support to develop their ideas. And then the best prize is usually at a panel, perhaps with the mayor, for example, and other business leaders would kind of award the best ones and give them an opportunity to either receive further funding or kind of develop and commercialize their product or service. And one of the reasons we're really keen on progressing this as one of the first pieces of the innovation framework is because it's really successful. The Mayor of London has done this for quite a couple of years now, and I think that's detailed in the paper. And there's also examples and case studies in the North East and the West Midlands in their combined authorities and LEPs. So we're really building on the success that they've delivered, really. It's also probably worth noting that this is linked to a good practice that we identified on our Smarty Interreg project that the Combined Authority is involved in. So that's about sharing good policy practices with other EU partners. In terms of the proposal itself, Councillor Pandor, you've commented and noted most of them, but just to briefly go through that, is that this pilot it's basically a lessons learned exercise for us, and it should hopefully influence our decision towards going towards a competition on a larger scale. It's already been mentioned that one of the focus of these pilots would be tackling the climate emergency, recognising that we've got our own 2038 ambitions and building on the momentum from COP26. What we'd kind of like from the committee in terms of comments is particularly what your views and comments are on the focuses that have been identified. So there's the three that are on 2.9. There's the business facing competition, there's the university student one, and there's a secondary school one. There's also a comment on corporate sponsorship as well. So that essentially that's about an organisation perhaps contributing to funding awards or supporting the process. And again, any comments on that would be appreciated, should we be able to secure a form of corporate sponsorship. And as briefly mentioned there, Councillor Pandor, the timescales aligned to the Innovation Festival being formally announced there, and then delivery will probably begin a few months after this. And we'd like to invite any committee members to be involved in the steering group for the festival. And I think that's another agenda item after this, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, I've got 9 questions, or 9 people putting their hand. So what I'll do, I'll take them all together, and then I might respond. But if I don't respond, I'll get officers to respond. It's just, I'm just conscious of the time, otherwise they're going to be here all evening, which I don't mind. But I'm sure you all want to get home or get to your next meeting. So I've got Derek first. Derek Whitehead.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Pandar and Mitchell, for the presentation there. Really good idea, you know, and needs to happen. From my point of view, just on 2.9 on the focuses, obviously we're representing West Yorkshire Consortium of Colleges. I just wondered why FE has been left out as a focus potentially, and whether that could be added, not just FE, but we could broaden that out to FE and independent training providers, because I'm sure that they've got a lot to offer as well, if you don't mind, if that's doable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Derek. Councillor Naheed Mather. Naheed.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I definitely support the idea. It is a catalyst to innovation, but I'd like to suggest a few ideas, like widening actual topic areas and addressing climate change, but in a circular economy, so that it's sustainable and it's related to businesses and more accessible and understood. And I'd like to give you some examples of things that I was thinking about in relation to that. So reducing waste, energy usage, clean technology, decarbonisation, renewable fuels, and chemicals, climate adaptations, resilience, sound like a start for 10. You know, it makes it much more specific rather than so broad that people don't understand what's going to be included. Thank you.
Thanks, Naheed. I did say that Tracy will be focusing on climate emergency, so all that they're talking about is probably a given anyway. But Sandy?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's a great idea, and both to involve SMEs and also young people. We've done something on a very, very small scale, and the response was good. So I think we get great ideas from young people. My only question on that is timing. I can see the intention is to fit it in with the festival. So talking to the people in education to see when they can fit it into work that they're doing within their own organisations, because you know it's a difficult year again, as we've said.
Thanks, Sandy. Sue?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm a member of the West Yorkshire Innovation Network, and so again, I do support this challenge approach, and it is a brilliant idea to link it in with that festival in June, particularly if that's the kind of kick-off moment for it. And as Sandy says, if that gives plenty of time for all the various groups to play in. I would also support what Derek was saying about broadening this out, not limiting it to particular sort of categories. Whilst it would be good to have students involved of all varieties, sometimes innovation comes from unusual places. So I think having a focus on young people would be great, but not sort of limiting access to any one person or category there would definitely be welcome. And then building on the climate theme, if we're looking ahead to future topics and themes, the other one I would vote for would be health, because I think a lot of young people and obviously the world in general is focused on improving health outcomes at the moment. So I would think another useful topic to add to the list would be that one. Thank you.
Yeah, no, completely agree with you. So health, especially after what we've been through, health is the vital elephant in the room, sort of speaking. Martin.
Thank you. I'm also really supportive of this approach. Again, it's been used really effectively, as the paper explains. Just 2 points, one of them around corporate involvement. To me, corporate involvement, and having worked for a multinational healthcare corporation for 17 years, to me, it's not just about sponsorship and funding. I think it's about getting corporates involved in setting the challenges and intimately involved from the start. So I just wanted to make that point, purely because I've been involved when I was working for a corporate. So many times organizations would come to us at a latter point and just say, we just want sponsorship or we just want funding. So I think there's a real opportunity to involve corporates, and particularly corporates that have a base in the region, at an early stage. The second point I was going to make is around the focus the focuses that you're proposing. And in reality, they're not mutually exclusive either. So when you look at focus 1 and 2, that could easily be combined, I think, in a challenge, because, I think undergraduates and postgraduates, are entrepreneurial, and something like this they would want to get involved with, as well as SMEs as well. So I think in some cases these are not mutually exclusive. When you're starting to talk about secondary school students, that may be a slightly different focus and a different approach and methodology. But that's just the second point I wanted to make.
Yeah, no, excellent points. I'm sure we can pick them up, and Tom Mitchell will, I'm sure, cover that when he comes back in. Councillor Jane Scullion. Jane, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Really cheered me up, this bit and the next bit on the papers, really, and last some good news, and then last a bit of the innovation that's in our committee title as well. So really welcome it, and welcome the focus on climate change and particularly on young people. I don't think we need to specify university or precisely what they're in. Young people, that focus really in terms of giving young people something to focus on and to have that reward and that engagement, I think would be extremely helpful. In terms of corporate sponsorship, excuse me, absolutely, go for it, but clearly has to be done with sensitivities in mind about some potential sponsors, particularly for focusing on young people. And I was wondering whether this also went to the Climate, Energy and Environment Committee, so that we're joined up as a set of public and private sector committees, so that we've all got behind this really. So just those points. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, again, excellent points. I'm sure that we can bring it past the Climate Emergency and Energy Committee, or what it's called nowadays. Richard.
Hi, yeah, as everyone else has been saying, really support this challenge. I think it's excellent and much needed. There's definitely a lack in this space. I probably can think of at least 2 or 3 people offhand who would be appropriate to sort of enter certain challenges that are fresh out of university with some wonderful ideas that need support. I really like the idea of that onward support. So, you've got the idea, but I do think there's often a gap of then allowing people to get the support financially and with guidance to commercialize that. So I think that's a really important piece. And I think it can be often lacking if they're not already part of perhaps an SME, especially the sort of the younger end. I'd also agree with Martin in terms of getting corporates and even SMEs involved in some of the challenges and setting the challenges early on. But then on the flip side of that, as opposed to exact corporate sponsorship, but allowing the SMEs like ourselves to perhaps be on those panels who are assessing those competitors and seeing if there's opportunities to make investments or support them financially thereafter. So a bit of a pitch and an opportunity to invest. I think that then gives a wider opportunity and potential scope to do more. And then the last point, there seems to be no mention of any higher education assets in terms of SMEs or even these postgrads working with the higher education institutions to develop the ideas further. Again, which, we're an SME, we work closely with Huddersfield University, and we couldn't do half of the research that we do without that higher education entity. So I think even in this scenario, it's really important to consider as well and capture. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. A lot there. Mandy?
Thank you, Chair. 2 points. One is I think we should encourage cognitive diversity. So it's not just young people that have ideas. I'm sure some of the older people like myself on this call can have ideas too. So maybe we might want to think about the categories being those in business and those not in business but are adults, and those not in business that are not adults as maybe the categories. But that means that mums who are bringing up families can come up with ideas, people who are out of work can easily come out with ideas, and we encourage everybody in the region to get involved in innovation. I think that's important. The second thing is I think we have to be very specific in the challenges. If they're too broad, I think we'll get less ideas. It's good to give people something specific to think about. And I think bringing in both corporates and public sector organisations, as has been done in the civic challenge by the Mayor of London, is important to think about. Thank you.
Yeah, no, good point. Diversity of age, I like that. You know, I'm still young, so right. Okay. We don't have any more hands up. So, Mitchell, do you want to just try and respond where you want to regarding the excellent feedback we've just received?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Councillor Pandor. And just to emphasise when talking about specifics, so one of the phases that we would have to do after we've appointed a delivery provider is we'd have to identify that. We've made a broad focus currently on tackling the climate emergency, but absolutely it will be specific going into whether it's efficiency or whether it's circular economy. That I just wanted to state that, and all the other comments have been noted down. I've written them all down, and we welcome the opportunity to look at alternative and other people to possibly consider incorporating into them and groups. So thank you, and there will be in contact with people to follow up any other points.
Yeah, so basically we're asking committee for two things. Firstly, to note the update, which we've done, and the comments have been very, very positive. And also, if any committee member are interested in taking a more of an active role, get in touch with Mitchell, and you know, we can do with your ideas even more. So just get in touch with Mitchell to help steer this forward. So thank you very much for that. Item 7 is the Innovation Festival, the West Yorkshire Innovation Festival. This was launched last year, and it was a success. And this is also part of the West Yorkshire Innovation Network with two overarching ambitions. One is to raise the profile of innovation and innovation business in the region. And from what I've heard earlier on, right, you know, there's a lot of appetite to actually do that, which is really, really great news. And the other one is to actually showcase a range of support that's available within our region. And again, this is like trying to spread our net even further, so we get more players on board. And a number of you would have been involved last year when we had the Combined Authority without the Mayoral Combined Authority. And it's looking at the innovation ecosystem across the whole region. So this is quite an important piece of work that we're doing. Planning is going to start now, 2022, and we're keen to get the buy-in and the support of all committee members and the steer from members in moving this important work forward. So I know Andy's had some input in this because he was chairing this last year. So I wonder if Andy wants to say something, and Mandy, I think you were involved as well last year. So can I kick off by Andrew saying a few words, and Mandy if you want to, and then we'll open it up. Sorry, Andrew, I'm putting you on the spot, but I think you'll...
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just want to remind people that it was a massive success last year in terms of the number of people that were involved in it. I think it beat some of the very big name shows in California and the like in terms of the amount of engagement we got. So not surprised to see it come back, very glad to see it come back. And I'd encourage everybody on the call to get as involved with it as you can do. It is an amazing thing, and I think a very good showcase for the region. I think there's a question in there somewhere that says, what should the emphasis be? That would certainly be my steer at this point, would be let's make it evident to people coming in from outside the region just how attractive we are. Thanks.
Thanks. Mandy, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, thank you. I think I probably said everything about the festival in my quote in the report, which said last year's festival was jam-packed, and let it be the first of many. So I'm glad we've got a follow-on festival. And I'm pleased to be chairing the West Yorkshire Innovation Network, and I think this is part of what we can deliver. I think it's really important to remember that innovation is not just about product innovation; it's about innovation in all its forms, including service, including society, including thinking. And so I think we need to be as broad as we can, but make sure that each little bit of the festival delivers something to a customer that wants it. Thank you.
Thank you. So you got your hand up?
Yes, thank you again. Yes, support this incredibly important commitment to go again with this, and really pleased to see that the mayor's on board as well. I'm happy to volunteer to join the subgroup or working party again through that link to the West Yorkshire Innovation Network. I've got a couple of questions. One is, what kind of partner are we looking for here? Is it a marketing company, or what's the thinking on the delivery partner that will be engaged to deliver the festival? And the second question is, there was mention of the Leeds Digital Festival, and that this approach is going to take over that West Yorkshire wide brief. So I just wondered what is happening to the Leeds Digital Festival. Is that staying as it is, or is it kind of merging into this broader West Yorkshire activity? Thanks.
No problem. We'll get the office to respond to that once we get all the comments in. Sandy?
Thank you. Yeah, again, I think it's a great idea. On what would businesses be involved in? I mean, some of the things that we've done, for example, around circular economy and sustainability, is that businesses go, we get it, we know we should be working on this, but tell us what we should be doing. Give us tips, give us case studies, give us things that we can take away and adopt in our own businesses. So I think that's quite an important thing to concentrate on. And then on the item related to promotion, I think actually those two things aren't excluding each other. So that actually, if there is a focus and an opportunity to talk about and showcase great things that are happening within West Yorkshire, then that becomes part of the promotion. I actually think that's quite important, because so often when it comes to funding bids and so on, it's all sort of negative messages. And we ought to shout about the successes as well and promote the companies who are doing really well. So I think we can't, it's not an either or, I think it is a both.
Councillor Naheed Mather. Naheed, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say something that always makes me think when we talk about innovation is we're not inclusive enough, we're not diverse enough, we don't look outside our own groups. And if we're going to be doing this, we need to go out and make sure that all groups are involved. And innovation happens in unexpected places within the home. And, you know, the pandemic has made us all innovate ways of doing and being and looking forward in a positive way. So I support this festival, but I would like to make sure that whoever's responsible ensures that inclusivity, broad inclusivity, that there is an explanation, you know, about what innovation can involve. It can be simple as getting up and you're unable to put your shirt on and you've got a stick behind your back with a shirt over and you do this. Or as my granddaughter would put her coat over the side and then just flip it over and her arms are in her coat. You know, that kind of thing. We take it for granted that everybody's on board, and sometimes they're not. So as long as that provides us built in, I also want to support what Sandy said. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Naheed. Is that an old hand?
No, it's a new one. And it's really about what Naheed and Sandy said. So cognitive diversity actually underpins innovation. So if we have groupthink and we have 10 people that all come up with 10 ideas, but we're all thinking the same thing because we've recruited from the same backgrounds, from the same cultures and so from the same age groups, we'll get 10 good ideas 10 times. If we recruit 10 different people, we'll get 100 ideas. So partly maybe the beginning of the festival should be about why diversity and cognitive diversity is absolutely the keystone to innovation. And I think that part about including everyone is really important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Points well made. Let me just see who the office is. Sarah, do you want to come back in and respond to any of the points?
Happy to. So just on the inclusive innovation point, absolutely. Absolutely agree. And that is the strapline of the innovation strategy, the innovation framework. It's innovation for everyone. And we tried to make some steps in 2021 to do that. We didn't get as far as we could. So having extra resource on board this year will really help us to really drive that kind of diversity angle. And going back to Sue's question, we are looking for an events management company to help us deliver these events and deliver this festival to the scale of which we're all kind of behind and we all want to see delivered. The Leeds Digital Festival, this is absolutely not going to cut across the Leeds Digital Festival. That's going to continue to exist, run by colleagues in Leeds. This is about innovation, but obviously digital is a really important part of innovation. So we're going to work closely to make sure it encompasses all the digital aspects it needs to, but it is much broader than digital. It is about innovation. It's all those things we've just talked about around what innovation is. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, thank you very much for all your feedback. It's really, really important that we get that and we capture it in terms of making it even better than last year. And then we'll get even better year after. And we continue to improve. Thank you very much. So basically, if you've got any time, anybody wants to volunteer, just let Sarah know. We can do with all the help we need moving forward on this particular innovation festival. Item 8, business support pipeline. You're probably aware that last time we talked about developing a forward work program for this committee, where key role will be to shape and prioritize future business support activities in terms of what we're trying to do. So what we're really delivering is what's needed for business in West Yorkshire. Focus on productivity, which we all talked about, innovation, which is a must in terms of developing that business sector, and at the same time becoming more resilient, especially on the back of what we're going through at the moment. You know, we want resilient companies, right? Yeah, that can actually survive any storm. We've already considered one potential new scheme, the Business Productivity Programme, at our last meeting, and we hope to see more proposals coming through in the pipeline to develop over the coming meetings. We've got Alex Clark, who can provide a summary of the paper that we've been presented. And we're really asking the committee to know an update and provide any feedback that you see fit. So can I ask Alex just to provide an update in terms of what this is about? Alex?
Yes, great. Thanks, Councillor Pandor, for that introduction. I think you covered really well kind of the lead in to this from our previous conversation. The development of kind of our future pipeline, I think, hits us right back to our initial conversation on the evidence base and the kind of the so what conversation that comes out of that in terms of so what do we need to do here in West Yorkshire. In terms of kind of what we'd like from the committee today, really, there are two areas in the report. At 2.8, that's really around some of the early areas for prioritising. So there's a couple of suggestions in there that come out of our previous conversation at the last meeting. But very interested in views on some of the right things that, from your perspective, should be programs, initiatives coming forward. You know, what's not on the list as well that should be on the list. And then at 2.9, this is really about how things come forward in the future to the committee. So what is the level of detail that the committee kind of wants from initiatives, kind of at what stage we want to see them in terms of kind of developed programs, kind of outputs, the question that's being answered really, and to get a steer from the committee about how we do that and how we best utilise our time as a committee kind of in these meetings and outside of the meetings to kind of bring those proposals forward. So two bits really, what's on the pipeline and what more do you think should be on that pipeline, and then how do we take that pipeline forward and how does the committee see their role in that? So really welcome any feedback.
Thank you. Anybody first? Monday.
Sorry to be gobby again.
Yeah, no, don't worry. I was going to volunteer you anyway, but right.
I was going to say that one of the things as a small business, I think that sometimes is difficult is training programs for team leaders. So apprentices and young people that come up but then need to get to the next level. If you want to get really good training, it's really expensive for small SMEs. There's an awful lot of training around at the moment for Spark programs and leadership programs, which I used to go on about, a few years ago. But what I think is missing is that first manager level, first team leader level is training that lots of businesses can buy into at a reasonable rate.
Thank you, Mandy. Sue?
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to understand a little bit more about this concept of the pipeline, because it does mean different things in different contexts. Sometimes it's been used to talk about a pipeline of capital projects in the past, but this seems to be more about revenue programs and how they're designed. Is that, you're nodding away, so is that what we're meaning here? And if so, are we looking to get the core infrastructure in place that's referred to in terms of the growth hub and the kind of startup managers and that kind of core infrastructure of support? Or are we looking at then the more specialist programs that would go around it, and how does all those pieces fit together in that jigsaw is what's going through my mind? Because if we are looking at that whole spectrum, then the couple of topic areas, I totally agree with what Mandy's just said about leadership and management, and this might overlap a little bit with the work of the Employment and Skills Committee as well, but it does feel like an important part of this business support infrastructure. But given what we've just been talking about in the last two items, innovation support as well feels really important. And I know we've already got programs running, connecting innovation, access innovation, those kind of previous programs, and there may still be a little way to run on those, but those two feel important elements to be part of that wider design element. So I'd welcome seeing it, how it all fits together in the specialisms as well as the core stuff. Thanks.
Yeah, we'll get clarification on that when Alex comes back in. Councillor Jane Scullion, Jane, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. Just wanted to flag up short-term concern about what happens when the ERDF money finishes in March, in late March, really, and just what we and Consultative and the other districts are going to do when that particular pipeline of funding ends, and what the replacements really look like. But I would agree with what Sue said in terms of the general business support, really, core support, as Sue described it, really. We mustn't lose sight within the number of specialist programs we've got of just the general business support. And I thought it was good also in the paper that it does need to be a pipeline which recognises that sometimes you need an urgency of decisions as well as the everyday routine throughout the year things that we've got. Yes, we need some provision for continuity, but we also need to understand that business development is not entirely linear and without lumps, as it were, and peaks, and that we need to take those things into account. Those were the main points. I just wanted to flag up the short-term concern, though, in terms of the end of the ERDF programmes, particularly. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. Andrew, over to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, thank you very much for the paper. And under 2.8, nobody else has said it, but I do think that those priorities that have been caught there are exactly what we said. And it's nice to see the committee working like that. So thank you, Alex, for picking that up. I think they look really strong in terms of picking up all the various strands of what we've said. But, the list is only 7 or 8 long, so it's not completely impractical. The other point I wanted to make was one of the things that was successful about what went before, we've said before, was being able to identify that, the 25 to 1 in terms of the public money going in and the public benefit that came out of the previous way that we worked. So I think, and I think you're alluding to this when you say that the initiative is clearly able to articulate the challenge or opportunity it seeks to address. It would be nice if we could have a snappy target of the kind that we had before, which says that if you put this much money in, this is the benefit that we expect to come out and that we'll be working and measuring against. I think we've got a tougher challenge when we're looking at operating money as well as investment money. I think it's harder to be clear about what the benefits are, but not impossible, and certainly something that we shouldn't shy away from just because it's difficult. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Naheed Mather. Naheed, over to you.
Thank you. Chair, I just wanted to support what Sandy said, but in particular, I do think there is, and I've just seen it come up in the chat, the gap for micro businesses not having a sufficient capacity and research and training and development actually targeted at more established sectors rather than the front line where they are so busy. And I think if we can support, and if we go back to the previous item about innovation and excellence and growth and taking on more skills, I think we need to make sure that, I don't know what's gone on before, but I think a concentration on micro businesses here would be very, very useful. Thank you.
Thank you. Carl, you got your hand up?
Thanks, Chair. Just to to elaborate a bit more on the last dotted point on championing alternative business models, for example, cooperatives. I think it'd be useful maybe to state the third sector here and how that, because clearly, over the European structural funds overall, these past decades, the third sector has been a significant recipient of funding and delivery of services and an employer in its own right. So I think it'd be useful, Alex, if we even, stated the third sector more widely, of which we're, cooperatives fits within that, and social enterprise. And then that actually lends, quite usefully to even more potential for accessing additional funding, complementary funding, and creative enterprise opportunities.
Thank you. Alex, you want to come back in?
Thanks. Yes, thanks, Councillor Pandor. Really helpful comments from everybody. Really useful. If I come to Sue's questions about kind of what we're talking about in terms of the pipeline, I guess just to kind of clarify, and others have kind of picked up on this in the conversation around kind of the end of European funding. Obviously, we have in mind for this a pipeline around funding that's already available, whether that be kind of through the single investment funding at the combined authority level, the devolved money, but also the future kind of European funding, the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, and anything else that might be coming through big pot or small pot from national government or elsewhere. And really, I guess this is about having a more consistent and collated approach at a regional level to how we address some of those opportunities when they arise. And I guess that to that mix of kind of revenue and capital, I guess that again will depend on the pots that are available. But we certainly shouldn't lose sight, I don't think, of that capital element, which is important to this. Absolutely, kind of to Andrew's point about the kind of setting targets on the kind of leverage, is kind of how I interpreted that in terms of kind of interventions. I think that would be really helpful. I do think you're right, we need to make sure that we've got those at the right level between the kind of operational kind of programs and kind of investment programs to make sure we're asking something that's going to be achievable, but that can still stretch us in terms of those outputs. And certainly, Carla, in terms of kind of the EG, it was very much one EG on alternative models, and we need to find the right kind of sweet spots for that kind of alternative models, and certainly would welcome any views on kind of how we focus that. But thank you very much for comments. If there are any kind of further points, more than happy to pick up kind of separate conversations, recognising we're on time on the clock.
Can I make a quick final point, Chair, if that's okay?
Yeah, go on. You've already started, so you've started. I'll let you finish.
Thanks, Chair. Just to commend Alex and colleagues, because I think it's reassuring under 5.2 to see that very proactive intent and commitment to ensuring that there's a sincere approach to equality through equality impact assessments, and as Brian was talking earlier, how, you know, in that very proactive and formative way, we are, you know, much more in, you know, kind of, you know, able to target in on too many long-standing issues and do that in a way that demonstrates the benefits to everyone, as you yourself keep saying, Chair. So thanks, Alex and team, for, you know, stating that. And I'd like to see more of that in every aspect of these reports that come through to us, to be honest.
Derek, you got your hand up and then we move on. Derek.
Sorry, Councillor Pandora, it were a mistake.
All right, okay, no problem. Right, okay. Thank you very much for all your input in this. And like I said, this process is owned by this committee. So whatever you want to see innovating in this process, right? Yeah, it's a continuous dialogue. So, you know, we need to make sure we get it right. And all the stuff that you put on chat will be picked up by officers. So we'll move on now to item 9, which is current delivery. There's 2 papers on this. One is around the enterprise program, and the other is around business accelerator fund. Firstly, the business accelerator program, which is funded until 2024. It's got a share of the £6 million of gain share, and there's 3 interconnected work streams that collectively form a ladder of enterprise support, from promoting enterprise self-employment as a career option to accessing funds to support to help people set up new firms in any sectors, through more intensive support for entrepreneurs with high growth potential. The programme was launched by Tracy Brabin, the Mayor, and Sir Roger Marsh at the end of November last year. Also, there were some intriguing presentations from several successful West Yorkshire entrepreneurs around a diverse background, and that was really good to see. Delivery is underway on work streams 1 and 2, and there will be a live tender closing in mid-January to late January to ensure that the 3rd stream is delivered. Secondly, the West Yorkshire Business Accelerator Fund, which is a new £20 million SME equity and loan finance product funded via return capital from Going Places Fund. This was presented to the last LET board meeting, and it's also gone through the Combined Authority in December. And this will provide a funding opportunity for SMEs in West Yorkshire from £50,000 to £2 million. A fund manager has been selected to manage the money on behalf of the Combined Authority. A tendering process has been completed. And one of the questions that came out was, how quickly can you start delivering? Well, you know, the time scales are very tight, and hopefully by summer, autumn, we'll be starting to deliver and get full throttle to actually start to get outcomes. They want to get desire to develop on early 22 onward. It's a 5-year investment program, and the realization projection is 5 years after that. And I'm sure Henry and Brian will be able to elaborate further on that. So can I bring Henry and Brian in, and then we can have a discussion in terms of how we move forward on this. So over to you, Brian and Henry.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'll ask Henry to cover the enterprise programme, the ladder of enterprise support. Both of these are really good news for the region. The enterprise programme is about business startups, and Henry will just cover some of that. And then I'll pick up on the business accelerator fund after Henry. So over to you, Henry.
Thanks, Brian. Well, I think Councillor Pandor covered a lot of it. Yeah, three interconnected work streams, and I think a client could join the programme at any point in those work streams, or work their way through the work streams in a sequenced order. You know, with a business idea through to some more light touch support, and then hopefully as the enterprise grows on to getting some more intensive support. It's a good example, this also, I think, of this committee and the Employment and Skills Committee working closely together, and we're certainly delivering the programme across the Employment and Skills team and the Business Support team within Economic Services. It's also, as the Chair said, funded through gain share, so that means that we're not quite as subject to some of the conditions and the criteria that we've had to work with, particularly around European funding. So a big emphasis on this programme is going to be supporting business to consumer operators who we've struggled to support the retail, leisure and hospitality sector with the RDF money. So those shackles have been loosened a bit, and certainly the types of businesses that we've supported so far on work streams 2 in particular, work stream 1 and work stream 2, many have been within the business to consumer retail sector, which is really important in terms of the impact of the pandemic on those sectors and on the high streets as well, of course. Another really important underpinning theme and focus of the programme is around equality, diversity and inclusion. And we've made a pretty good start really in terms of the targets that have been set for the programme around engaging with female entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs from BAME backgrounds, but it's early days. We're not rested on our laurels. There's loads more work we can do in that area, but we are looking to engage with a number of, and are engaging with a number of sort of key forums and groups that are listed there in the report. So yeah, good solid start, but still plenty more important work to do on this particular programme.
Thank you, Henry. What we'll do is we'll take this item first, and then we'll go on to Brian, so we'll keep it both separate items. So first on the item that Henry just talked about. So I've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to say it sounds as if it's got off to a really cracking start. And I also attended that launch event for the West Yorkshire, the Enterprise West Yorkshire, and agree with what Councillor Pandor said about it was a really inspiring and very diverse range of stories there. So well done to the team for pulling all that together. And I'd got a question really in terms of the referral routes for the whether it be the inspiring enterprise or the exploring enterprise or the business startup program. Is it best if we've got anybody interested in these for them to go through the website, or do you want them to call the growth hub as the entry point, or is it either or?
Either or. So really, I mean, for expediency and a quick response, if they can go through the website, I think that's the best way, because there's a clear route for work stream 1 and work stream 2. We're also getting a lot of referrals through the Adventure programme for work stream 2 and some for work stream 1 as well. But sort of default position is this a business that we can support through Adventure? And if it's not, which is usually on a sector restriction because of business to consumer, or because this is the other important thing on work stream 2 is this is not about, there's no growth restrictions, there's no growth forecast restrictions for the client. It could be, a self-employed person to begin with. There's no like, oh, sorry, you're not going to turn over X amount in year 1, so you can't come on the programme. It's very much a universal offer. So the clients that we're seeing come through are generally those that are not forecasting, big growth to start with and are in business to consumer. And a lot of those are coming through our website and through Adventure.
Thanks.
Okay, can we move on to your item, Brian, which is the Business Accelerator Fund, which we launched, or we took through the Combined Authority on last month, and good news that we've got a successful bid that's coming. So you want to just update us on that?
Yes, just to provide an update to the committee. I mean, this is really good news for West Yorkshire because it plugs a gap in the market. It enables us to through a fund manager to invest in high growth businesses across West Yorkshire, including startups. So it could be an innovative startup or a spin out from a university or an ambitious high growth technology firm in the region. It's a £20 million fund. The LEP and the Combined Authority approved the proposals in December. We went out to a competitive tender and appointed a fund manager. It's still under a non-disclosure agreement at the moment because we're negotiating the contract details, but the fund manager has over £8 billion worth of funds under management and considerable experience in lending into the SME market. So it looks really promising for the region, really positive. We are looking to launch the fund at the end of Q1, so you're probably looking at April this year for the full launch. And we're in the process of setting up the company that will administer and run the fund via the fund manager. I'm happy to take questions if there are any technical questions with regards to governance or investment strategy. Fire away.
Martin?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, Brian, just a quick question about how this relates to Northern Gritstone, which clearly is an investment fund being set up by 3 universities in the north, and they're really gaining traction at the moment. I think that fund is likely to be 500 million, predominantly invested in technologies coming out of universities, but also a proportion of that can be invested in non-spin out companies as well. So I'm just interested in terms of whether there's been dialogue and thinking about how they can be complementary and work together in a more, in a sort of a synergistic way.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful, Martin. Same with the Northern Powerhouse Investment Fund. And in setting up the fund, we looked at the size of the addressable market, and clearly there's a huge disparity in terms of venture capital investment in the south compared to what we've got in our region. We do need to look at, as part of the negotiations with the fund manager, we'll be signing off the investment strategy, and an integral part of that investment strategy will be around the marketing, the comms, and deal flow, and how they'll actually operate with other providers in the region. So I think it's really important that that there's no overlap, and that we're able to join it up, and that's something I could pick up with you outside the meeting.
Yeah, I'm very happy to make the introductions if I can help in that process, Brian.
Yeah, brilliant. That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, Andrew.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm just interested in, Brian, whether there's anything we can say at this point about how this committee will interact with this. It is an incredibly exciting development. 20 million quid is really a very sizable chunk, and I'm sure people on this committee will be very interested to be involved. How much can you say at this point about what that involvement might look like?
Well, certainly the performance of the investments that have been made will be reported back to the committee. And it will be at our discretion how we reinvest the funds that are generated. So, for example, the funds look at an internal rate of return of around 12%, which will generate around 8 to 9 million over the life of the fund. How the surpluses, how the profits from the fund will be reinvested would come back to the committee for discussion. So there will be an opportunity to report on performance, and also to have a say in how the surpluses generated by the fund will be reinvested. At the moment, the intention is it will be reinvested in supporting more SMEs, and it'd be set up as an evergreen fund. Yeah. But that will be at at the committee's discretion and the CA's discretion.
Very good. I hope we'd also get sight of the sort of the ongoing investments that are made, so that we've got some kind of ability to comment on how the portfolio is developing. So I know there's been lots of things said about what kind of portfolio we want to come out. It will be good if we can kind of just check that is actually happening.
Yeah, absolutely. So the performance of the portfolio, the investments that are being made, will be reported back to the CA and to the committee.
Very good. Thank you.
So we can see which sectors are being invested in, where the growth is coming from, what the performance of the investments is looking like. All of that performance data will be built in.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Brian. Amir, you got your hand up?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's a brilliant thing. I mean, my question really is around sort of where, and I guess it follows on from what Martin was saying, in terms of can this be directed to serve niches that might not ordinarily access the funds that are already out there? I mean, there's a lot. I mean, most tech businesses that have got to the point where they are investment ready have actually usually got quite a lot of options in terms of where they go to fund it. And I do think that we need to look at areas that are more challenged, where that sort of investment doesn't happen, how we're getting them to become oven ready, and whether this is something that can particularly target sort of those areas, and I think there's certainly an inclusive growth angle to how that could be targeted. And I understood from the LET board meeting that there was going to be a match fund from the private sector, which I understood was essentially equally matched. But I did wonder whether we could broaden that out, and whether the fact that the combined authority is involved in this, and that carries a certain amount of due diligence scrutiny, and one would assume a certain amount of credibility to the businesses that are being invested, whether actually there'd be more people that would also be interested in backing these businesses, and whether we could leverage more money out of the 20 million that we've got, so that if people are looking at it saying, well, we would match, you know, if the combined authority is putting in money into this startup, we'd be willing to put money in as well. And whether that private sector leverage, especially I'm thinking of a lot of the businesses that are maybe quite traditional and are not engaging in the sort of transformational sort of journey, actually find a way of getting involved in it and being exposed to it, and thereby themselves actually increasing their sort of knowledge and awareness of the art of the possible.
Yeah, I mean, the forecast in terms of match funding was pound for pound in the initial proposal, but that wouldn't preclude additional investment from other sources. I think that's a really good point. And I suppose the second thing I wanted to comment on was the investment criteria, and we talked about reaching some of the hard to reach communities earlier in the meeting, and it's going to be set up as an ESG fund, environmental social governance fund. So the investment criteria won't be purely on financial measures. It'll be on a whole host of other measures. So they'd have to be committed to inclusive growth. There'll be elements of, so for example, the Mayor's Fair Work Charter, and there'll be a number of other non-financial criteria associated with each investment. So that's one of the things that differentiates it from some of the current venture capital funds that are out there.
Thank you. Henry, got your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick comment in response to that. I think we would all, linking it back to the previous item on the entrepreneurship package, Workstream 3, which is going to be supporting a smaller number of high growth entrepreneurs. We would be hoping that some of the potential deals for this fund would come from clients that we provide intensive support to get them to that investment readiness stage, and then we can, you know, hopefully have discussions with them about their equity or debt finance requirements.
Thank you very much. I've got Carl, and then I've got Martin, and then we'll move on. Carl?
Thanks, Chair. Just as Henry's just unlinked it back to the previous item, but also just to say, when we are talking about those hard to reach groups, Brian, can we ensure that, you know, because a bit under the phrase BAME, it's a very diverse group underneath that, and I do know in the reports presented we've got examples or pilots of, you know, South Asian businesses and projects. Well, and that's really encouraging and really good, but we have more diversity than that, and it'd be great that we can make sure that when we do roll out some of these programs and the EIAs that we are doing, we are targeting, you know, that potential as well.
Okay. Right, thank you. Martin?
I very much liked just to support the comment that Henry made, which I think is a really good idea, because often I think these high growth potential entrepreneurs and founders which address social or societal impact, often that's the group that at the early stage finds challenging to get the appropriate investment. So I think the idea of actually linking the two through the criteria that you're going to use is great. So just wanted to voice my support for that.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you to Henry and Brian for the hard work they put in these reports and the work behind it as well. Item 10 is linked to skills committee work, and there is a link in your report that will take you to the link to the skills committee. Just give you a flavour of what work they're doing. But what I'll do is I'll invite Brian to just provide some context in terms of how we propose to take this work forward, and then maybe if members want to provide their input, we can get even better in terms of what we're trying to achieve. There's been some references already made to skills, which is really good, right? Yeah, because it just shows that our thinking is already in that space. So Brian, provide some more information so we can develop our thinking even more. So Brian, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I think moving forward, it will be increasingly important that we get really close working and collaboration between the Skills Committee and this committee. And I mean, a couple of skills points have been made this morning. This afternoon, Mandy talked about first line management skills and the cost and some of the barriers for small and medium-sized enterprises. And I think it's really important that we play that back into the Skills Committee. So, the supply side, the FE colleges and the universities can respond to that. And perhaps going forward, there might be an opportunity to look at a joint task and finish group around particular skills and economy related issues. The next meeting's on the 24th of this month, and the agenda will cover the adult education budget and progress with AEB, an update on programme delivery, and then there are two reports: the State of the Region report, which sets out some of the strategic context in terms of the economy and some of the challenges that we've got in West Yorkshire, and then there'll be a local skills report. And again, it'd be interesting just to share that with committee members to see if there's any correlation with some of the points that have been made around first line management skills. There's also a report, an independent evaluation that's been done on enterprise in education and some of the work that we've been doing in Leeds City region with the careers hubs and schools across the region, which again, we can share a link to that report for members. That's essentially it on skills. Obviously, at the next meeting, I'll make sure that that the minutes and reports are referenced so that you can access them. But happy to take any questions on that.
Right, okay. Happy to take any questions or comments or suggestions from members of the committee. This reference has already been made, so we need to just try and get a broader understanding. So, and then I've got Andrew.
Yeah, it's just a quick point in relation to those first line management skills. One of the things that we've done at the University of Huddersfield is we've set up a leadership centre to run those kind of practical skills programmes on leadership. And so we've got a couple of groups running at the moment at director level and then a kind of an operational team manager level. And the first cohort that ran benefited from the contribution from the European funding that was still in place in September, the very last lot of it, and that really helped some of the SMEs that sent people onto that programme to be able to afford to do it. Now we're recruiting for the next programme in April, and one of the issues that we're finding is that the smaller companies don't have access to that kind of contribution anymore. So there is a bit of a gap emerging, and I know that Tracy Brabin has mentioned she wants to find a way of bringing forward some other kind of support in that space. The other thing we're finding is that the larger companies are very, very keen to spend their levy, their apprenticeship levy, and they've been directed to do that rather than spending any other money. And whilst there are apprenticeships for leadership and management roles, they do involve the people involved doing it 1 day a week, and some of these programs last between 2 and 4 years. So that's quite a time commitment for any business to put their leaders or first line managers, whichever level they're looking at, on a program that's going to commit them to 1 day a week of learning for several years. So there is a bit of a gap in the middle there for the kind of businesses that want something, that maybe is 1 day a month for 6 months or thereabouts, with very practical application, but for which the current support programs don't quite work. So when people are looking, Brian, in terms of the colleagues who are designing these things, happy to share that kind of feedback as to where it would really make a difference.
Yeah, I think that's.
Yeah, go on, Brian.
I think that's helpful, and I don't know. whether there will be an opportunity to divert some of the adult education budget into plugging some of those gaps for eligible courses. Obviously working through the local FE colleges and private providers.
Yeah, I've got Andrew and I've got Derek.
Yeah, just a quick one from me that I have in the past attended some of the skills group meetings, and I did find that very, very helpful. I know everybody here is extremely busy, and therefore it may be, a ridiculous suggestion in some ways for people to allocate their time to it. But if you do have a chance to, and these meetings are online now, so I mean, you could do it formally through channels and get yourself involved in the meeting if you wanted to, I'm sure. But the other way of doing it is just to watch the public Zoom. I personally did learn a lot from that, and I would commend that as a way of going on. It is a different world, their committee. They spend a lot more time on adult education and career service, for example, than I had realised before I had a look at it. And there is good overlap between the two committees. So I think the more we understand what the priorities of the other are, the better it is. Thanks.
Thanks, Andrew. Derek?
Yeah, thank you. Just to respond a bit to Brian as well, Brian, regarding the adult education budget through West Yorkshire Combined Authority. We have got a meeting as principals next week, and it is on our agenda. Wicker are obviously reviewing the adult education budget, where we're up to at this moment in time, and there are funds still available, and it potentially could help in terms of what Mandy were asking for earlier, if there's that flexibility within the programmes to do it. And we're here to help wherever we can from the West Yorkshire Consultative colleges. Brian, you're also aware of what's taking place probably on ILM as well in terms of other programmes, but if not, if you need a chat, I'm more than happy to have a chat with you. Thanks very much. Bye for now.
Brilliant. Thanks, Derek.
I don't think I've got anybody else, so before I bring Brian back in, I think one of the things is, I'll just check this as well with Liz, that the adult education budget wasn't to do with the Combined Authority. So now the pot of money is with us, so there's a massive opportunity. Because one of the arguments we were putting forward as leaders was, we know our communities, we know our issues, give us the money and we will do a better job. So we've got the money now, we need to do a better job than what the other structure was delivering. A few things from my side is we are all different places across the region. Like Kirklees is very different to Leeds, is very different to Bradford and all the rest of it. And as a region, we are very different to the other regions as well. And one of the things that I would just like to highlight is, although we need to look at where the biggest gaps are, what we also need to do is, we might think that, the biggest gap is here, but if you look at the total place compared to another region, the gap is even bigger because of how the total sums add up. So we still need to keep an eye on the challenges that we're facing, because if we are going to link the skills agenda to the business, economy and innovation agenda, we need to actually look at the higher end of the skills market as well. We need to actually produce entrepreneurs, the innovators, the future business people, and you have to invest in that as well. So we can't leave people around who we think that actually the benchmark of their attainment is actually here. So we don't worry about that too much. Let's start focusing on people who are actually way below the benchmark, which is the right thing to do. But at the same time, there's got to be a fine balance. What I want to do is actually lift them people who are down here, at the same time lift the people who are actually above the benchmark, but comparatively they're still well below nationally. Because as a region, we can only compete and become better by actually developing high caliber individuals that can actually then be the pioneers of tomorrow. So there's a lot of work to do, I think, here, because I don't know, and this is not a political point, but I don't know that the leaders, including myself, will have a different views on this. So what I would want to do is be very, very clear in terms of what our ask is from a business, economy and innovation point. So then I can go back to the leaders and say, actually, this is what the business is wanting. And you can't have a prosperous city region if the business is actually not singing from the same hymn sheet we are. So I'm just putting that out there that we need to think about this. That the money's there. Let's make that big difference that we need to. That links to the agenda that we're trying to deliver. Brian, I won't say any more because I'm in danger of overstepping my mark. But I'll let you come in and then just sum up what we need to do. Brian.
No, I think it's a brilliant summary. Just on the skills, it's inextricably linked to economic and innovation agenda. I think some of the points that have been raised around where we've got skills gaps and some of the barriers that SMEs face and how we can address them through the devolved funds with AEB and some of the fantastic providers we've got in the region is something that we need to take forward and bring back to the next committee. Just on a practical level, I mean, we've seen lots of strategies and plans, but the reality on the ground is, if you're running an SME, some of the points that Sue raised about taking an apprentice on, being out of the workplace 1 day a week and such like, with the devolved funds, if that gives us the freedoms and flexibilities to remove some of those barriers, then that's got to be a good thing. So I'll certainly take that away and raise that with the skills committee and look at what we can do.
Yeah. Can I just bring you in terms of because obviously you were doing what I'm doing for a number of years, what's your thought on this? Because I think although the skills budget is with the skills committee, there's a direct linkage, and there's no point in developing skills that businesses can't use. So business is critical in terms of making sure that we shape that agenda.
Good, yeah.
I do agree. What's your thought? Yeah.
So I think that we should certainly be very flexible in terms of how we view the resources across the two committees, because so many of the objectives are shared. And certainly, I know one of the challenges that the FE sector has faced is when monies are very much tied to funding coming from businesses, they can't always get delivered what they need to get delivered, particularly during the pandemic. That was a problem, and that was an example of something where I think if we'd brought it to this committee and had some input here from it, and maybe looked at the resourcing of how students were being supported, we might have been able to come up with something more creative that got around the way that the government had provided the money was creating. So I think particularly on resourcing questions, it's very, very complicated, and there's so many different pots involved that it is quite tempting to sort of not touch it. But actually, there have been some significant problems in the last 2 or 3 years in terms of delivery on the skills side, and I know everybody in this committee would have been quite disappointed by some of those outcomes, and we might have been able to do something about it if we talked about it. So I think going forward, the more of that we do, the better.
Yeah. See, sorry to go on. I'm conscious of the time, but the way I see it is, if you can get your skills base to a very high level, and we sort of like more or less sort of like do some horizon scanning. So basically, if somebody's willing to move up north in our city region, well, they're not going to move up here if they don't have them specialist skills. So like IT, Leeds is a financial centre as well. So there's so many opportunities we've got around here. What we don't want is the brain drain also, that we actually get the skills and then they're dispersed into, say, down south. So there's a lot to think about. There's a big opportunity here. If we can get it all tied up and all in a nice package, then we'll get the higher end of the jobs that we all ask for. All the local authorities are going through the local plan process. We've got a local plan where we've got a very clear business strategy. So it all needs to link together. Anyway, a lot of work to do there, Brian, but I'm sure we'll get there. Right, okay. I think that's the end of the meeting. Once again, thank you very much for your time. It's really appreciated. There's been some excellent feedback, excellent comments and suggestions that are coming forward. And like I said, I'm only a facilitator of this meeting, because the thing that keeps the whole thing moving is people like yourselves from business background. And once we get the pieces right, and once we get all our ducks facing the right direction, at the moment you feel like ducks are facing one direction, and suddenly we get something come left field, and it just sort of like messes everything up. But I'm sure we'll get there. We've got like an item number 9 regarding the the business accelerator and the enterprise program. You know, we are doing stuff, and we are actually, you know, well equipped, and we're in a really good position. So despite whatever is happening out there in the real world, you know, I am quite upbeat. You know, there's a lot to celebrate. There's a lot of things that we've got in the pipeline that, you know, that's coming on the horizon, and we will be there hand in glove with the private sector and the public sector and the voluntary sector, and we will become the best city region. That's what our mission is to be. So thank you very much for all your help, and it's only possible for you guys. So thank you very much, and I will see you again when I see you. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you.
Thanks, Chair.